Cabinet, which, due to government advice to the public to practice social distancing, will once again be held virtually. The meeting is being recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed following the meeting. Everyone participating in the meeting today will be accessing this meeting from remote locations. Please could everybody ensure that mobile phones are switched off or to silent mode. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda. I will ask officers to present a summary of the key points. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their cameras on at that time, but I would ask that, with the exception of myself as chairperson, at all other times you keep your cameras and microphones switched off, as this will help to minimise any background noise and interference and to ensure the connection remains as stable as possible. Any members, Cabinet members and officers wish to raise a point or question, they should use the instant messaging icon in the bottom left of the Skype window and simply type speak. I will come to you in the order that I receive requests from Cabinet members. Please do not use your microphone until I invite you to do so. Officers from Democratic Services will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout the meeting, and where necessary will mute those not being used. Before we formally commence, I will now ask the officer from Democratic Services to announce the names of the councillors in attendance at this meeting. I will also ask the officers to introduce themselves as and when I invite them to speak during the course of the meeting. Those two should ensure microphones and cameras are switched off when not in use. Mark, please.
Thank you, Leader. For the benefit of the recording, I'm Mark Galvin and I'm the Senior Democratic Services Officer Committees. And present today we have Councillor Hugh David, Leader and Chair, Councillor Howell Williams, Deputy Leader, Councillor Denisha Patel, Cabinet Member, Wellbeing and Future Generations, Councillor Charles Smith, Cabinet Member, Education and Regeneration, Councillor Richard Young, Cabinet Member, Communities, and Councillor Philip White, Cabinet Member, Social Services and Early Help.
Okay, thank you for that, Mark. So we will now go through the agenda. We do not have any apologies for absence from members or officers. So we will now take any declarations of a personal and or prejudicial interest, if any, from members or officers in accordance with the provisions of the Members' Code of Conduct that was adopted by this council in September 2008. Are there any declarations of interest from members, particularly in regards of items on learner travel and post-16 provision? As I know, some colleagues are members of school governing bodies, and we have a member of the Corporation of Bridgend College too.
Leader, I'm Chair of Governing Body of Abercurden Primary School.
Okay. Thank you.
Leader? I'm, go on, Richard.
I'm sorry, Tanisha.
Yeah, if you could use the chat box and then I can come to you in turn. Okay, I'll bring Councillor Young then, please.
My apologies, Leader. I jumped the gun there. I am Governor at two schools, leader, one at Ysgol Bryncastell and Lychard Junior School.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Young. And then Councillor Patel, please.
I'm a governor on CCYD, and I'm also in the process of reaffirming my interest in Ocknell Vale Primary.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Patel. Councillor White, please. Councillor White. Have you turned your microphone off, Councillor White?
Ah, the famous muted word. Thank you, Leader.
That's okay.
Chair of Governors at Nanty Fethlon Primary School and the Governor at Maesey Comprehensive School.
Okay, thank you, Councillor White. And Councillor Smith, please.
Governor at Kevin-Glass Infants and Governor at Bridgend College.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Smith. I don't have anyone else indicating that they have an interest to declare. So we will now receive our first report of the meeting from the Interim Chief Officer for Finance, Performance and Change on the budget monitoring, the Q1 revenue forecast. Please, Jill. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. And for the benefit of the recording, Jill Lewis, Interim Chief Officer for Finance, Performance and Change. The report that you have in front of you today at Cabinet is the Budget Monitoring Report for 2020-21, the Q1 revenue forecast. And the purpose of the report today is to provide Cabinet with an update on the Council's revenue position for Q1, and also to seek approval for any budget variance between 100k and £500,000 as required by the Council's financial procedure rules. You'll be familiar with the format of this report. You receive a quarterly report on the revenue position at Cabinet each quarter, but this one just has some slight differences in it because of the pandemic and the COVID challenge that we've all had over the first quarter of this financial year. So you will see that there's reference quite frequently to the effects of COVID, and I'll touch on those as I briefly go through the report. So if I take you first of all to Table 1, this sets out the summary financial position at the 30th of June and gives you the net revenue budget and the projected outturn for 2021. And as you'll see, which is quite unusual at this stage of the year, we are projecting an overspend at the moment by the year end of just over 3 million. And that comprises 2.8 million on the directorates and about £250,000 on corporate budgets. And I think it's important to draw your attention to paragraph 4.12, where we've set out the projected position based on these four factors: the inclusion of reimbursed expenditure to date on COVID-19 from the Welsh Government, exclusion of spend that's currently on hold with the Welsh Government, the exclusion of COVID-19 spend that has not yet been claimed or incurred in quarters 2 to 4, and there's no inclusion of support from the Welsh Government for loss of income as yet, as the level of support has not yet been confirmed when we wrote this report, and indeed hasn't been confirmed at today's date. So that's what's been included in here. And I think it's fair to say that COVID will continue to impact on the financial stability of the council. We were put into lockdown on the 23rd of March, and as you will see in 413, the result of that lockdown and the inability to deliver services as normal has resulted in additional cost pressures, some one-off, some recurrent. The lost income, which could be very significant, some will be deferred, some will be lost, particularly car parking, school meals, planning fees, etc. There will be pressure on us to deliver on our MTFS savings, and some of which may be more difficult to achieve during the year. We're hoping that there'll be some unanticipated savings where we've reduced the provision or stopped, and certainly we know that there are some in home to school transport, premises and fuel, and council tax, which remains quite an unknown quantity, where there's likely to be quite an impact and a shortfall in council tax collection. 4.15, there's a detailed table setting out the Welsh Government financial support. We've been very lucky in receiving significant financial support in many service areas to date, and you can see those set out in the tables. You'll be familiar with the business rate grants, significant sum of money obviously paid out in Bridgend to help businesses, and obviously to help service delivery. You'll see some detail on some of the other amounts that have been given to us. The costs of the pandemic are significant and continuing to be incurred. We are submitting detailed claims on a monthly basis to the Welsh Government. They have set up the hardship fund, and you'll see from table 2 the expenditure claims for Q1 of this year, total of which we submitted 3 million, and we've had 2 million paid. I think it's fair to say that the majority of claims have been paid. The disallowed expenditure relates to ICT costs, and I think it's fair to say that we would have an ongoing medium-term benefit from those, and therefore they have agreed to pay 50% as a contribution to ICT. I should add that that is consistent across all councils, so not just for Bridgend. We're also submitting a claim for loss of income. We've submitted our first quarter claim, and the Welsh Government have committed funding of 78 million to mitigate against that, not just in Bridgend, that is across Wales, obviously. But no agreement has yet been reached on how that will be distributed or on which areas that will be prioritised. So our first quarter estimate is shown in table 3 and comes to just over 2.5 million, again across the areas that I've alluded to. I think it's fair to say that we also will suffer from a reduction in council tax income collection rates, and that's set out in 419, and also in 4.110. There's likely to be a significant increase in claims for universal credit, and therefore the pressure on our council tax reduction scheme budget, which, as members will know, is cash limited. There's a number of budget environments and technical adjustments that you'll be familiar with in the report. I'm not going to go into the detail, but happy to take any questions. And then you'll also be familiar with an update on our budget reduction proposals. The prior year reduction proposals, we've achieved quite significant sums now. The shortfall is set out in 422. It's 709k still to be achieved from prior years. And on this year's budget shortfall, we are 451k short, and the detail is set out in 4.2.5. From 4.3 onwards, there's a detailed commentary on the overspends, underspends, and the position of each of the directorates and the corporate position, with some overspending areas, as you can see, and some loss of income, mainly school meals, home to school transport, leisure, reduced car park income, homelessness, and council tax reduction scheme. There are other pressures, obviously, and there are likely to be further pressures in quarter 2, 3 and 4. And that's all I wanted to say, Leader. I take you to the recommendations at 9.
Okay, thank you for that overview, Jill. Helpful overview. Deputy Leader, please.
Thank you, Leader. And obviously these are very challenging times, not just for this authority, but for all local authorities across Wales. I attend regular meetings with my counterparts across Wales, and you know the picture is very similar in all authorities. I don't think I've ever seen it quite as difficult as this certainly in my time as cabinet member, and probably not as my time as an elected member. There's much uncertainty ahead of us, and I must say that I welcome the support that we've been offered by Welsh Government, and I sincerely hope that that support continues, because without that £2 million of income from Welsh Government, of course, the figures today would be far worse and far bleaker than everyone. Obviously, it's a concern that the council tax collection rates do appear to be under pressure. And I would urge any members of or any householders that are facing financial difficulties to get in touch with us as soon as they can. You know, we're all in difficult times here, and we want to share that pain, and if we can be of any assistance in helping people through this, because we want to get to the other side of this pandemic as quickly as possible, and we want to take everyone with us, of course. So in terms of the report itself, it is quite a bleak picture. We are facing very challenging times, but I'm sure that we'll survive this, and we'll come through it.
Okay, thank you for that, Deputy Leader. We have faced very difficult times before. What's different now, as you've highlighted, is the uncertainty as well. So we have uncertainty about our income, but also about our expenditure. As you said, Welsh Government have been very supportive. However, we do have a number of claims that we've made for loss of income, and the loss of income is as big as the extra expenditure we incurred. So if we do receive that, that will improve the position. But what we don't know is what additional expenditure we may have to incur throughout the year, on what income we will lose as we continue to respond to this pandemic. And none of us can make a firm forecast and commitment about what our spending income will be like in the coming year. It's a very, very uncertain period, as the Deputy Leader has explained. Councillor Patel, you wanted to come in, please.
Hang on. Thank you, Leader. I'm happy to move the recommendations. I would just like to go back to paragraph 4.1.5 and really thank Welsh Government for the finance, because I think when reading the items in that table, they've all really made a difference to the lives of residents. And so for me, the digital digitally excluded school pupils and children's mental health budget items were very well welcomed, as well as, you know, I know charities and businesses have also really benefited from the business rates relief. And so I think that shouldn't, I know it's a bleak report, but there are some really promising developments from Welsh Government, and yeah, hopefully they will look at our other items that we put forward with the same kind of consideration as they've given the first tranche.
Absolutely, Councillor Patel. The support that's been provided from us through financial support from Welsh Government has been a lifeline for many businesses and many families. There have been some that we've been unable to help. However, we've done our best, and it is difficult to help everyone. We've often been delivering schemes that have been designed elsewhere with clear eligibility criteria in place. So the recommendations have been moved and seconded. All agreed with the recommendation that we note the projected revenue position, which of course will change, I'm sure, throughout the year, and recommend that Council approve the environments between £100,000 and £500,000 that have been highlighted in paragraph 4.11. All agreed?
Leader.
I agree.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. So we will then move on to the second report from the Interim Chief Officer for Finance, Performance and Change, and that is the Q1 outturn report on the capital programme. Jill, please.
Thank you, Leader. Just checking that my microphone's on before I start talking to myself. And for the benefit of the recording, it's Jill Lewis, Interim Chief Officer for Finance, Performance and Change. What you have in front of you here is not the same capital report that you've been used to. This is a combination report, and I think I outlined at Cabinet last month that because of COVID and some of the slippage and the inability to deliver on some of the capital schemes, we were going to bring both the capital programme outturn for 2019-20 and a Q1 update report, and that's what you have in front of you this afternoon. So what you have is an update on the capital outturn, which is shown in Appendix A, an update on the first quarter highlighted in Appendix B, and the prudential indicators for 2021 in Appendix D, the agreement from Cabinet to present the revised capital programme, which is shown in Appendix C. So if I take you briefly through the outturn first for 2019-20. I won't go through the background. You'll be familiar with the Council's capital programme. So if I start at the outturn position at 411, and you will recall that at Council on the 20th of February was the last time that the capital programme was reviewed. And at that time, it was part of the medium-term financial strategy and totaled just over 30 million, of which about 14 million was met from our own resources, capital receipts, revenue contributions, earmarked reserves and borrowing, and the remaining 16 million coming from external resources. And as I said earlier, Appendix A gives you the details of all the individual schemes within the capital programme and the budget available. Now, obviously, February 2020 isn't that long ago, although it probably seems like a lifetime to us. So there's very few amendments since then to close the outturn, other than two changes set out there. There was some new approvals of nearly 2 million, and that's a very welcome new grant scheme from the Welsh Government, the Hub Infrastructure Grant. And then just under £500,000 funding brought back from 2021 to reflect the spend profiles. So that brings the outturn budget to 32.5 million. So the total expenditure as at the 31st of March was just under 23 million, which meant that we had an underspend of 9.5 million. And that's reflected from a number of schemes that are commenced but not yet been completed. So they've been moved wholly into 2021 as slippage. And they're shown in 414. The most significant, probably the Slimby development, the Children's Residential Hub, the Enterprise Hub, digital transformation, and some of the minor capital works. So there's slippage coming forward through into 2021 of just over 9 million. So that's the outturn for 2019-20. So if we move now to the Q1 update, and that shows us in table 1 that the capital schemes come to 56 million for 2021, and you'll see the revised budget for 2021, if you include the slippage, comes to just under 63 million. And you can see where the bulk of those schemes are situated in communities, and there's some quite significant schemes included in that total. So table 2 shows the capital programme resources and how we're going to fund that 62 million. And Appendix B gives you all the detail of the individual schemes within the capital programme and shows the budget available in 2021 compared to the projected spend at the 30th of June for the first quarter. From 424 onwards, there are a number of amendments to the capital programme for 2021 for new and amended schemes, and these are since it was last approved at Council in February. So there's amendments to 21st Century Schools Band B, mobile classrooms for Mynydd Cymfig, which was a chief executive emergency decision during COVID, which is detailed there underneath the narrative on the classrooms. The installation of electric vehicle charging points, the Children's Residential Accommodation Hub, and also the Brinkethin Depot, the Enterprise Hub, the Recycling Centre, and the Western Valley Empty Homes Pilot. That's the subsequent item on the agenda this afternoon. So the revised capital programmes included as Appendix C, and then, as you will recall, the prudential and other indicators are now included in the capital report rather than the Treasury Management Report. They're set out in Appendix D, and as I always say at this stage, it shows that the Council is operating in line with approved limits. And I don't look forward to the day when I can't say that. So that's to be commended. There's a lot of work that goes on to make sure we stay in line with approved limits. So that was all I wanted to say this afternoon. Happy to take any questions, but I take you to the recommendations at 9.
Okay, thank you for that report, Jill. Deputy Leader, please.
Thank you, Leader. And yeah, for the benefit of the recording, I'm Councillor Howard Williams, Deputy Leader of the Authority. And yeah, thanks. I'd like to move the recommendation at 9, and in doing so, just sort of comment, I suppose, on the urgent delegated decision that we needed to take to provide emergency accommodation. I suppose that might. That was you know, an unexpected cost for us, but it's something that we moved very quickly on, and we've got we managed to sort that out. Also, I welcome the installation of the electric vehicle charging points. I always enjoy spending Welsh Government capital grants on that, and obviously very welcome the Children's Residential Accommodation Hub development at the former Bryn Melyn Primary School. So move for recommendation.
Okay, thank you for that, Deputy Leader. And you're right to highlight the importance of the and the urgency of the decision that we made about Mynydd Config Primary School. All the group leaders were consulted and supportive of that that urgent decision, and I know that that provision will be put in place as quickly as possible. Though of course it is more difficult because of the pandemic, but we will get it in place as soon as we possibly can, and it's also pleasing to see the update on the Children's Residential Accommodation Hub and the funding that we've received from Welsh Government through ICF of 650,000. That's good news. There are, of course, some projects where we've seen higher budgets than we originally anticipated, but where that is the case, it's been because we've been through a tender process, and the highest, the lowest bid that we've received is higher than what we've budgeted for, and there's always that robust process in place when we are awarding contracts that we go through a competitive tendering process. I don't see that anyone else wants to come in, and of course we will have the opportunity to discuss this at length tomorrow during full council, because it will require approval from full council, but I believe the recommendations and amendments there are important and necessary, and there are 4 projects like the Enterprise Hub, Bridgend Enterprise Hub, and the Community Recycling Centre that have been in the capital programme for some time. So all council members will know about the different schemes. One question I had for the Director of Education was on the plans for Christie Primary School. Is the Director able to provide more information about that project, please, Lindsay?
Thanks, Leader. It's Lindsay Harvey, Corporate Director, Education and Family Support. As you can see, there's 2 projects there that are benefiting from the infant class size reduction scheme. And what we're seeking to do there is to provide better accommodation for learners in early years and foundation phase. So these are the 2 schools that we're working with at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Lindsay. So the Deputy Leaders moved the recommendations. Councillor Patel seconded the recommendations. All agreed? Okay.
Agreed, Leader.
Yes.
So, thank you for that. So we will move on to the third report of the Interim Chief Officer for Finance, Performance and Change on the Welsh Government grant, the Western Valleys Empty Homes pilot. So Jill, please. Jill, I think you're still on mute.
Yep, just unmiking myself, sorry. Thank you very much, Leader. For the benefit of the recording, Jill Lewis, Interim Chief Officer, Finance, Performance and Change. This is a report brought to you today on the Western Valley Empty Homes pilot, which is a Welsh Government initiative. I think you will recall that we brought to Cabinet previously the Valleys Task Force initiative, and both initiatives are focused on bringing empty properties back into use, which I know is a key priority for Bridgend Council. So the northern parts of the Bridgend area are within the Valleys Task Force catchment area, and on the 30th of June last month the Cabinet approved phase 2 of the Valleys Task Force Empty Homes grant, and the approval was given to enter into the agreement with Rhondda Taff County Borough Council, who run and administer the grant for the northern parts of the county only. So for geographic areas outside of the Valleys Task Force initiative, the Welsh Government has proposed a separately run initiative, and I should say that this is only a pilot until the end of this year, and for that reason councils have had to discuss whether they would be able to achieve the targets that were set out under this pilot. And as you can see in paragraph 3.3, 2 authorities so far have agreed to take part. One has declined due to difficulties in providing the match funding. I think it's important to say that both these projects are quite distinct. The Valleys Task Force initiative is for people who wish to purchase an empty house, whereas the Western Valleys Empty Homes project is a grant designed for landlords to bring properties back into use in exchange for nomination rights for social housing purposes. And it's very distinct where there is a need, a demand for houses. So specific locations of housing need would need to be identified to take part in the project. The scheme can't be applied in conjunction with other schemes, and we did ask whether we could roll it up into a slightly different scheme, supplementary funding for RSLs, but the Welsh Government have made it very clear that this is the way that they would like this pilot, and it is a pilot and hopefully will be rolled out further in future. The offer is for us to take part in the pilot and to find match funding of up to 91k. The targets that we have agreed to at the moment would be 13 properties with the Welsh Government, but after negotiation and discussion, the level of grant and the match funding will be adjusted on a pro rata basis, so it's a much better pilot that we can enter into. So we would need to find 91k of match funding, and we have put that into the capital programme on the item that you discussed earlier. So I don't think there's anything further that I need to add to this. I'll take you to the recommendations at 9.
Thank you for that, Jill. Potentially exciting project that we are talking about. So I'll ask Councillor Patel to come in, please.
Thank you, Leader. I would like to move the recommendations in the report. I welcome the report. I know that the Valleys Task Force area, together with our own housing strategy and the Empty Homes Officer that we've also invested in, have been very successful. Surprisingly, not everybody wants to live in the valleys, which, you know, surprised, because I certainly do. But anyway, I think we do need to have an investment offer or a grant offer for areas outside of the valleys where people do want to live, and I think this initiative will help us meet the demands of people that do actually want to live in the county, and it is it's a lovely place to live, and so I think that if we can offer more housing, we will. So yeah, I'm happy with the report, and hopefully colleagues will support the recommendations as well.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Patel. So next, I will bring in Councillor White, please.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, happy to support the recommendation, Leader, and it is welcome news. There's no doubt about it whatsoever. Some of our empty properties in the Northern Valleys are a blight on the landscape. Yeah, and they do need to be tackled. And I am pleased with the scenario also that the empty homes and the Western Valley grants are sort of split into two different offers, one for private homeowners that they can access, but just as importantly is that it's opened up for HAs and RSLs, and at least if they do get the go-ahead on some of the refurbishment and restoration of our empty properties, that they have to make those properties available for 5 years on a rented period. So that's good for the social housing element as well. But welcome news. I hope the pilot works out well, and I hope it will be a longer term commitment by this authority going forward. Happy to support.
Thanks for that, Councillor White. We know that empty homes is a priority for all members of the council, and any opportunity we can to secure additional Welsh Government grant to help us bring some of those empty homes back into use as homes by local families is to be welcomed. And we will have a progress report, I'm sure, Jill, on the impact
Absolutely.
of the pilot. And then we can review that impact, as I'm sure Welsh Government will be reviewing the impact to see how successful it's been, and if it is successful, we would want to build on that, particularly if there's a high level of Welsh Government funding to go with it, because tackling the blight of empty homes and the waste of empty properties is a key priority for this authority. So the recommendations have been moved and seconded. All agreed? Thank you, colleagues.
Agreed.
Yes, agreed. Yeah.
So I'm going to give the Interim Chief Finance Officer a break now, and we are going to move on to the first report of the Corporate Director of Social Services and Wellbeing, and this is on a contract extension for the Close Penglyn Supported Living Service. Sue, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. For the purposes of the recording, this is Susan Cooper, Corporate Director of Social Services and Wellbeing. The purpose of the report is to seek authority to vary the current contract with Drive in respect of the specialist supported living service at Clos Penglyn by extending the existing term for a further 12 months in accordance with Contract Procedure Rule 3.2.9.3. Just by way of background, Clos Penglyn is a specialist supported living scheme in Pencode, and it's for individuals with complex learning disability and autism. The existing contract, which is in place with Drive, expires on August the 31st. The recommissioning timetable to renew this has been affected by COVID, as it should really have taken place during the spring and summer of 2020, ready for implementation on the 1st of September. So the Cabinet report proposes an extension of the current contract for a further 12 months, which would take us to the 31st of August 2021. And if I take you to paragraph 4.2, it actually sets out under which we're able to do this. So it's the provision under CPR of 3.2.9.3, and there are 3 points there which enables us to come today to ask for this extension. I would like to draw your attention to paragraph 4.4, which actually sets out that there was a concern in 1920 which actually put this particular scheme into escalating concerns. However, I can confirm that the provider developed an appropriate action plan, which has been satisfactorily completed. And there is a process around managing escalating concerns, which Cabinet will be aware of. The main issue was to do with staffing. That has been confirmed and changed, and they've actually had a new manager at the house as well, which has been very helpful. So what needs to happen now is that a further meeting would be convened to formally remove the scheme from escalating concerns. And ideally, this needs to be informed by a contract monitoring visit. But of course, the current guidance doesn't allow any visits to care homes or supported living environments. So as soon as the visits are re-established, this will happen and the property will come out of escalating concerns. If I take you to paragraph 8, which is around the financial implications, there are no, it sets out what the current cost of the scheme is, but the extension, there's no extra costs as a result of extending the contract for a year. So with that, I'll just take you to the recommendation at 9.1. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, thank you for that report, Sue. Councillor White, please.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, thanks, Sue. Welcome that. Happy to support the recommendations, Leader. Didn't need to ask for the assurances from the Director. Under normal circumstances, our monitoring team would have been in there with the inspection, but as a result of COVID, this is where we are. And everything is pointed out by the Director. It doesn't fall foul of anything whatsoever. So I think we can proceed with confidence that a 12-month extension for the contract with Drive should go ahead, and happy to support the recommendation, Leader.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor White. It's reassuring to hear that changes have been made that addressed some of the, addressed all the reasons for the escalating concerns. That's very good news, and I'm sure that a briefing will be arranged for the local members to update them on this, and I also, as I'm sure everyone does, recognises the vital importance of continuity in terms of providing services to some of our most vulnerable citizens, and because of that, I'm also happy to support the contract extension until we're in a a place where we can recommission it in a smooth way that eases any transitions into any possible new contract arrangements. Okay, is everyone in agreement with those recommendations?
Agreed,
Yes.
Leader.
Yes.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Sue. The next item on the agenda is a report of the Chief Officer for Legal, HR and Regulatory Services. So I will ask Kelly to present the report. Please, Kelly.
Thank you, Leader. For the recording, it's Kelly Watson, Chief Officer, Legal and Regulatory Services. I've just got the one short report today, Leader. Members, the purpose of the report is to inform you of an information report that's been published since your last scheduled meeting. The details of the report can be found at 4.1. It's the Treasury Management Quarter 1 report. It was published on the 15th of July. That actual report is included in your pack. And I just take you to the recommendation and ask you to note the publishing of that Treasury Management report. Thank you.
Thank
Happy
you,
to
Kelly.
note.
Second.
That.
I agreed.
Okay. Thank you, colleagues. So we now have a report of the Corporate Director Education and Family Support on the agenda. But before I invite the Corporate Director to make the report, I've had an indication from the Cabinet Member for Education and Regeneration, Councillor Smith, that he would like to make a statement about the report. Councillor Smith, please.
Thank you, Leader. It's Councillor Charles Smith, the Cabinet Member for Education and Regeneration, and I would just like to say in my defence I'll be having a haircut tomorrow at 9:30 a.m, so I should be a bit tidier for tomorrow's council meeting. Members, 2 weeks ago we had a joint scrutiny and overview committee which considered the Learner Travel report and the post-16 reorganisation report, items 8 and 9 on today's agenda. Two sets of recommendations came back from that meeting, and these recommendations have been incorporated into the two reports, 8 and 9, tabled for this afternoon. We welcome the opportunity to involve the wider membership of this council in these two fundamentally important cabinet decisions. In the case of the 16 plus reorganisation report, I believe that the recommendations from SOSC can be accommodated, provided Cabinet this afternoon decides to adopt the recommendation for option 3, and I can't see any difficulty there. However, in the case of Learner Travel, the list of recommendations on page 107 of the reports pack, paragraph 4.9 of reports item 8 on the agenda. It's a long list and it's a complex list of recommendations. I've been discussing these recommendations with colleagues and with officers, and as Cabinet Member this afternoon, I don't think we're in a position to say that we've had time to consider those recommendations in the detail they deserve. And so I want to propose that we proceed with item 9 on the agenda, but we defer item 8 until our next scheduled Cabinet meeting, which will be in September. Now, our decisions on 16 plus reorganisation will also have knock-on effects for Learner Travel. So for that reason as well, it makes some sense to consider the two items one after the other. So, but as I say, we want to respect properly the recommendations on Learner Travel that came forward from our fellow councillors, and for that reason I'm proposing we defer item 8 until September. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Smith. So that proposal has been made that we defer that item because of the detailed recommendations and proposals that were made by our colleagues in the Overview and Scrutiny Committee on Monday, and time for us to consider that set of recommendations properly and consider the impact of the decision that we will be making about post-16 provision. The proposal from Councillor Smith is that we defer this item. Is everyone? Are there any questions for Councillor Smith or officers about that proposal, or is everyone in support of that proposal?
I'm in support, Leader. It was quite a large report, and I'm happy that we're able to be in a position to actually defer it until I think all questions that need to be asked are asked and all answers given.
Okay, I would like to support that, Leader. I think the brevity of this report needs to be appreciated before such time as we make a decision on it.
Thank you, Councillor Young. And for completeness then, Councillor Patel and the Deputy Leader, please.
I'm in agreement with my colleagues and agree with everything that Councillor Smith said.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Patel.
Yes, Leader, I'm happy to support the deferment. I really do think we need to understand the full consequences of whatever decision we take on this, and I want to study the scrutiny committee's recommendations in more detail.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. The points I all agree with, and thank you, Cabinet members. Thank you to officers. We will then formally defer the Learner Travel Policy Cabinet report to the next meeting of Cabinet. And we will move on to the second report of the Corporate Director of Education and Family Support. And that report is on the public consultation phase 4 on the plans for post-16 provision across the county borough. I know that we are joined by John Fabes, the post-16 provision specialist officer, alongside the corporate director for education and family support. So I'll ask Lindsay, will you be making a short introduction to the report, or shall we ask John to introduce it?
Thanks, Leader. Just a quick one from me before I pass it on to John. I think everyone will join me in just thanking John for the huge amount of work that he's put into this report before he starts. It's been a significant piece of work involving many thousands of learners and staff. And just before I hand over to John, just to recognise his hard work in the process. So with your permission, Leader, over to John.
Yeah, certainly. As I've given you permission to hand over, John, I'll also give permission to Robin Davis to leave the meeting. You will be returning, Robin, to give a report on learner travel at a future meeting, but thank you for your attendance. So, John, please, and my thanks and the thanks of all Cabinet colleagues for the mammoth piece of work that you've undertaken here on post-16 provision. and very pleased now to hear the results of that huge piece of work that you've undertaken on behalf of the authority. John, please.
Okay, thank you this afternoon, Leader, for that introduction. I hope I'm coming across loud and clear. Right, thank you. Just for the record then, my name is John Fabes and I'm the Post-16 Specialist Officer for Bridgend, and I have been leading a review into Post-16 provision across the county for some 3 years and 9 months now. And it's really good to bring this particular report finally to Cabinet. So the purpose of this specific report was to bring back to Cabinet the detailed feedback on the public consultation that Cabinet gave approval for back in the last autumn. And we ran a public consultation from the 2nd of December through to the 21st of February on what we called the phase 4 of the review. And in phase 4, we had moved from a broad range of concepts down to some specific recommendations. And in the report, there were 3 broad options that we were considering, and that is to look at a mix of sixth forms across the local authority with some mergers and into sixth form centres, and those sixth form centres to be run by the local authority. A variation on that was to have a mix of sixth forms with sixth form centres, but the centres then would be set within the FE sector. And finally, the third option, which was the most popular one coming through from previous rounds of consultation, was the retention of sixth forms in all our schools. So on the face of it, the sort of current position being maintained, but further development of the practices in those schools around collaboration and partnership. So those were the options put out into the public consultation. The consultation ran across online surveys. We held public meetings within all the secondary schools. We also ran student workshop sessions. Again, a feature of this post-16 review from the very beginning was to engage with learners. And I think we've probably passed 5,000 learners being engaged in the process over the 3 years. We also had specific sessions for staff and governors. And we also had a session at Bridgend College as well. So we did go widely out across the community in order to gather the views for this. And the response has been regarded as robust from the public. And in paragraph 3.6, you'll see that we had a total of 12,140 interactions and feedbacks from the public. However, we did run into an interesting item in the online survey where somebody set up an automated routine to respond to the survey and generated 6,971 responses through that automated routine. So we did have to extract those from the survey results to give the more accurate view of the public. And those accurate interactions amounted to just over 5,000. And the full sets of the survey data can be found in the appendices, where we give both the data from all 12,000 interactions plus also the 5,000 with the automated routine item extracted. Very quickly, the sort of headline from the online survey is around option 3. It was by far the most popular option of the ones presented in the paper. And as you can see there, 75% of respondents strongly agreed with that as a proposal. And if they were asked to rank the 3 options, then 85% ranked it as their first choice. So that one, which I mentioned earlier was the most popular one in previous consultations, continues to be the case. Where we did talk about merging sixth forms, then clearly the voluntary merger of sixth forms rather than compulsory mergers was a preferred model. In 3.7, we give a breakdown of the sorts of responses we got from each of the proposals in option 1. There were 6 variations on the types of sixth form merger that might be proposed within the local authority remit. And in broad terms, there was consistently strong disagreement with merger proposals. In most cases, around 2/3 of respondents were rejecting those suggestions. The reverse was true, of course, at the retention of a sixth form at Porthcawl, and the only one that was slightly against that flow was the Config-Porthcawl merger, where the respondents disagreement with that were down to 49%. Moving down through 3.7.1 below the table, we give a detailed breakdown of all the outcomes from A to F and how the correspondence broke out from that. So I'll just refer to outcome A, which was the merger of Bryn Teg and Bryn Tiryon comprehensive sixth forms into a new centre. And we had 1,411 respondents, of which 48% of those strongly disagreed. We had a very strong turnout of opinion from stakeholders who were linked to Bryn Tiryon and CCYD, and 77% of the responses were from that quarter. So those figures are featured in there so that you can see that from those two schools, a strongly disagree feature of 77% came through. Bryn Tiryon only, 74%. Other schools, the remaining 7, the disagreement rate came down to 27%. So it does fluctuate from school setting to school setting in terms of responses. However, that's the sort of pattern we've given you so that you can look at the nuances in terms of each outcome for the different settings across the county. And at the end of each breakdown there, we provide some of the sort of top 3 statements, because in every survey there's scope for free text comments, and the issues that were raised by each one in light of those are listed there with the italic bullet points. So in terms of outcome A, plenty of reference to loss of familiar teachers, loss of familiar environments or support. That's a very strong feature coming through in a lot of these statements. The additional travel comes up frequently in the returns, and the role of sixth formers and the positive impact they have on their schools was a third one there. So those details are shown there, but I won't go through every single one of them at this point in time. We'll go down to 3.72, where we did the same breakdown essentially for option 2, which was the centres to be based in the FE settings rather than under local authority control. Either in the town centre or with the ambition of maybe a new campus in the town centre for Bridgend College, or the other option was to look at attaching a sixth form centre to the new STEAM centre being built by Bridgend College on its Pencoed campus. So again, there was a disagreement, quite strong disagreement in many cases to those proposals, with the exception of the Pencoed campus, because when you look down at the detail there and the breakdown, the returns from Pencoed Comprehensive School were actually the reverse of the general trend, with 72% of the returns being in agreement with the development of a sixth form on the college site. So one has to make sure that we drill down to school-specific responses at times. In option 3, that was the retention of sixth forms in all our secondary schools. Again, as I mentioned earlier, very strong positive response to that. We then will open up some further detail about what we would expect to see in terms of requirement through improvements to partnership and collaborative practices, and those are listed further on. So that's the breakdown from the surveys that came through. In 3.8, we look at the pupil surveys in schools. So this was the actual face-to-face sessions with students, and we provided a detailed breakdown there for each school about the number of students that were taking part in this, and the views that they presented back to us under each of the different options. Moving on through the paper, beyond that table there is a little breakdown behind each school, which also illustrates the range of students we saw in each setting and how many were from Key Stage 3, Key Stage 4 and from Post 16. When we get to 3.9, this is the other part of the consultation where we received written submissions and also took down the comments that were raised at the open events in the secondary school settings. 1,900 written submissions, and we are able to reflect the reviews of all the correspondents that contacted us. The list at 3.92 gives the most popular themes that emerged either from the feedback in the public meetings or through the correspondence. Into section 4 and the position of where we are now. As I mentioned earlier, the issue of transport raises its head a lot throughout this consultation, and so it was important I think to spell out exactly what the position on transport is currently within our schools in a non-COVID time, that is. So we have obviously students travelling to Llangrannoed and Archbishop McGrath for their specific types of education in Welsh medium and faith, and transport is provided there under the usual local authority rules of free transport. And there were a number of respondents who felt that increasing travel time would have an effect on standards. Both those schools enjoy high standards of achievement. We don't see that as an impact from travel. The other type of transport we've got going on is post-16 collaboration in twilight at Bridge End College. We have a lot of students, around about 200 students a week, who would normally travel to Bridge End College for their A-levels in the evenings. The sessions run from 4 till 6, and there was transport laid on to bring them from their home school into the college and back. There are more students normally studying in twilight A-levels than there are in daytime collaboration. So it is not unpopular. A lot of students choose that route, and we have some of our best results actually coming from some of the A-levels that are delivered in that setting. So again, the length of day, the timings and the need for transport has not diminished impact on standards. There are factors around cost. Obviously, clearly, you'll be considering this in later papers around the attendance at Bridge End College and the support for post-16 learners there. But the things that came through from the consultation were that there would be significant cost, additional cost for young people in some of the proposals that were being put forward, where we were merging sixth forms. And I think a lot of families had concerns over that. So whilst we are very mindful of the travel costs and the impact of that potentially can have on students, what we currently see is that there isn't a pronounced impact from the use of travel. In fact, many students specifically adopt travel to get to the type of facilities that they wish to study in. Moving on through section 4, the other points in 4.41, which are related to costs, are feedback from families, which indicate that they might have to pay out maybe £5 to £30 a week in additional costs for learner travel. There was feedback on the disproportionate effect on learners who might travel to Bridge End College, and also that perhaps the travel factor and the costs associated with that might be disproportionately affected on the communities that live in the valleys compared to those that live in the towns, and so that poorer and perhaps more disadvantaged communities would be greater affected by some of these changes. So obviously we recommend in 442 that the transport paper, which you've just deferred until September, that needs to be looked at very closely in tandem with this post-16 provisions paper. Some wider issues were raised, particularly through the public meetings. One was the context of the local development plan and how that might shift the demographics in the county, and therefore the capacity of secondary schools would come under scrutiny. And in line with that, the development of Welsh medium provisions versus English medium provisions, and how the flow of students into secondary schools might be accommodated in the long run. And it was quite possible that the outcomes of the LDP, once published, may influence planning for secondary provision and thereby in turn for sixth form provision. In 4.6 we go into the specific considerations of the outcomes, and they are all sort of listed there. If I may move to 4.6.6, which is specifically option 3, and option 3 there is a bit of a typo in the second line there. It should now read in the not the short to mid-term, but for the foreseeable future. And you'll find that rephrasing in the recommendations when we get to that point. So for the foreseeable future, this is the preferred model that's being put forward. And we suggested that it's not quite status quo, but that there are various improvements that would be proposed. And they are listed in the bullet points there, with a greater degree of formalization of arrangements and an opening up of choice for students within the curriculum offer, and a greater place for blended learning within the mix, and particularly for minority subjects that are small numbers of students spread across the county who want to study those minority subjects. So that's the list of improvement proposals that we're looking at. We did, as earlier mentioned by Councillor Smith, go to the scrutiny subject and overview scrutiny committees last week, and their points have been fed back in at 4.7. And we are able to respond to most of those points there. So 4.7.1, the mergers between Bryn Teg and Bryn Tirion sixth forms would be on a voluntary basis as and when the schools might be prepared to move in that direction. The short to medium term references we have adjusted to read as in the foreseeable future. So we are happy to respond to the recommendations around that and provide greater clarity. The figures that were questioned in terms of Bryn Tirion, we get those updated on a regular basis from the 21st Century Schools team, and we are comfortable that the figures contained in our various reports on the demographics of students are still accurate. With regard to 4.7.4, there was issues around the potential expansion on the CCYD site for additional facilities, which could help accommodate the potential forecast for students in that area and also accommodate a sixth form. So we are happy to acknowledge that. The other aspect was the support that came through, the acknowledgement there of the success of the Pencoed Comprehensive and Bridgend College collaboration, and the fact that that's possibly not a wider solution for the whole county, but it's certainly within the range of improvements that we are looking for going forward. So that's in the final proposals. Welsh medium, if we formalise the prospects for the other English medium schools under option 3 in terms of partnership and collaboration, we would expect to do exactly the same for the Welsh medium provision with Clanharry in RCT. Head of sixth forms, we do work together we have joint meetings with the heads of sixth form and the deputy heads, and indeed the head teachers of our schools in Bridgend. So that clear collaboration that they're asking for is something that is in place, and we would obviously continue with. And then finally, the last item there was the issue of where facilities are being based in Bridgend town, in the town centre. There was a suggestion that that might be discriminating in favour of more affluent areas. Option 3, in fact, does ensure that there is a retention of sixth forms in our most disadvantaged communities to allow that aspirational progression to take place on their home territory, as it were. There was a significant number of proposals and suggestions around blended learning, and we have incorporated that into the recommendations. And likewise, the wellbeing of future generations, we continually upgrade the assessments on that, and are content that that is responded to there. On the wider issues, we've mentioned the LDP, and student representation is mentioned at 4.7.22, and as indicated, we have consulted with in excess of 5,000 students through this process. Moving down through the sort of tail of the paper, we come to section 9 with the recommendations there, and Leader, I just point you to the recommendations and conclude my presentation there.
Okay, thanks very much for that, John. A comprehensive report, a comprehensive set of proposals reflecting the huge amount of work that's gone into the future of post-16 provision in Bridgend. Councillor Smith, please.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, and thanks once again, John. I've really enjoyed working with you, and I've always had the feeling I'm in the company of a real expert in this topic area. And you are, the way you've interacted with the schools and the way you've reported back to us has been meticulous. Leader, I'd like to propose that we adopt the recommendations. The 7 recommendations are on page 230, paragraph 9.1 onwards. There are 7 there, but I would say the 2 key ones are numbers 2 and 3, paragraph 9.2 and 9.3. The key ones are that we, I hope, this afternoon going to adopt option 3, and in tandem with that we are going to commit in a big way to the future and the new normal, which is blended learning. And in that respect, I have to say that schools are a little way behind universities in making use of that technology. We're not saying that everything is going to go online. What we are saying is that online learning has a fundamental part to play, and it can help us to communicate rather than have to constantly transport. There are some other recommendations there. There are options stated for Pencode, for CCYD, and for the possible Heronsbridge site. But for the avoidance of doubt, I'd like to state quite clearly that those options are complementary to what will become our main policy, a policy of retaining sixth forms. They won't undermine or replace that policy, and they'll only proceed when the opportunities, if or when the opportunities arise, and they'll only proceed with agreement and consent of all the stakeholders concerned. I'd like to thank the head teachers and senior staff for the positive way they've engaged with the consultations, including, and some people might be surprised at this, head teachers who might have been seen from a distance as being quite comfortable in their own little cocoons and quite able to survive as independent sixth forms without interacting with the wider Team Bridgend. But I'm very pleased to say that we've had buy-in to this consultation from head teachers who could quite easily go it alone, but who have indicated that they are ready and willing to cooperate with other schools in order to make sure that opportunities for sixth form education exist right across our county. I'd finally like to stress that option 3 is not the status quo. It's only the status quo in the sense that it gives every school the opportunity to have sixth formers and every staff member the opportunity to do some sixth form teaching if they are so interested. It's only status quo in that it retains sixth form provision in every one of our secondary schools. It's certainly not status quo in the way that it's going to make demands for cooperative working. We're going to have to collaborate among schools even more than we have in the past. And we're going to have to collaborate with the college and with other 16 plus providers. But I think this, if my colleagues are minded to second and adopt these recommendations, I think this is an exciting and positive way forward. And I'd like to especially thank the SOSC members for their comments, which John has partly responded to. But I think this package of policies will address just about each and every one of the concerns and recommendations that came from the wider membership of the Council. Thank you, Leader.
Thanks for that, Councillor Smith. We certainly have listened to members of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. We've listened to parents, we've listened to governors, we've listened to staff, we've listened to schools, but most importantly, we've listened to the learners themselves and what the learners have thought about the future of post-16 provision in Bridgend, and overwhelmingly, the students have expressed support for the retention of local sixth form provision across the county borough, whilst extending choice and offering more opportunities. And that's the proposal that we have in front of us today, and the option that we have in front of us today. And that's why I'm very pleased to be able to support it. I'm pleased that we will be working very closely with Bridgend College and with Pencoed Comprehensive School on a very exciting plan around sixth form provision in Pencoed, associated with the new STEAM, the state-of-the-art new STEAM Centre. I'm also very pleased that we will be looking at the potential expansion of Coleg Cymunedol Aderwen. And again, I'd like to thank everyone that's taken part in the process. It's been over 4 years, but it's been a very robust process, and the recent pandemic has changed so much about education, but has also shown the value of blended learning and the opportunities that we have around collaboration and online learning. And I know that our schools, our college, our staff and Team Bridgend are able to capitalise on the strengths that we have, and to make the most of that technology and that collaboration that we have here in Bridgend, and we can build on to provide even more choice and options for our students. The recommendations have been moved by Councillor Smith. Is everyone in agreement with those recommendations?
Agreed, Leader.
Agreed, Leader.
Agreed.
Yeah, happy to support.
Okay.
Okay. So thank you for your attendance. John, we now move on to the third report of the Corporate Director for Education and Family Support, and that is on the School Modernisation Programme Band B, and the Mutual Investment Model and the Strategic Partnership Partnering Agreement. That report will be presented by our lead officer for the 21st Century School Modernisation Programme, Gaynor. So very warm welcome to Gaynor, please.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gaynor Thomas. I'm the Schools Programme Manager. I'd like to present the report on the Mutual Investment Model for the Welsh Education Partnership Strategic Partnering Agreement. The purpose of the report, it provides an update on governance arrangements for the Mutual Investment Model, or MIM, and requests the Cabinet notes the progress of the preferred bidder stage of the competitive dialogue procedure under the Public Contracts Regulation 2015, approves the entering into the Strategic Partnering Agreement with the Welsh Education Partnership Co, or WEPCO, to facilitate the delivery of education and community facilities, approves the Strategic Partnering Agreement, gives delegated authority to the Corporate Director, Education and Family Support, after consultation with Monitoring Officer and Section 151 Officer, to approve the final terms of the Strategic Partnering Agreement, including any amendments as may be necessary for reasons including but not limited to finalising any outstanding areas, to approve any further deeds and documents which are ancillary to the Strategic Partnering Agreement. Notes that in agreeing to the Strategic Partnering Agreement, it is not being asked to decide to proceed with any Pathfinder project. Any decisions to proceed with a Pathfinder project will be reported back to Cabinet in future reports for decision, and approves the appointment of Councillor Charles Smith as participant representative to sit on the Strategic Partnering Board. I'd like to take you to Section 3 of the report. Sections 3.1 and 3.2 details Cabinet decisions in relation to Band B schemes that have already been made and confirms the approved funding envelope of 68.2 million. Under Section 3.3, the Mutual Investment Model has been designed to finance major capital projects due to a scarcity of capital funding, and it is based on traditional private-public partnership structures, but with core principles embodied, which are detailed in the bullet points at 3.3. Under the MIM, the private sector partners will build and maintain public assets, and in return the Council, supported by funding from Welsh Government, will pay a fee to the private partner, which will cover the cost of construction, maintenance and financing the project. At the end of the contract, the asset will revert to the Council. Cabinet will be aware that Welsh Government funding intervention rate for MIM schemes is 81%. Under 3.5, since October 2019, Welsh Government has been running a procurement process for a private sector partner to work with it on the delivery of MIM schemes under the 21st Century Schools Programme, and it will be the only means of delivering funded Band B projects, which are revenue. Successful partner and a subsidiary of the Development Bank of Wales will be required to form Welsh Education Partnership Co, or WEPCO, which will deliver infrastructure projects and services. Cabinet has previously determined to fund 2 schemes via MIM. So the current situation, the participants to the arrangements for the Strategic Partnering Agreement will be a number of local authorities and further education institutes. Participants and WEPCO will enter into the Strategic Partnering Agreement as at Appendix 1. The SPA, Strategic Partnering Agreement, provides for how the parties act together over the long term in a collaborative, partnering, non-adversarial and open manner to support the effective planning, procurement and delivery of education and community facilities. The SPA is due to come into force, executed rather, in September 2020. The initial terms of the SPA is 10 years, but it could be extended by 5. WEPCO is provided to provide partnering services to the participants as detailed in 4.2. Paragraph 4.3 sets out the services that WEPCO have exclusive rights to deliver participant in terms of project delivery, partnering services, project services for qualifying projects, which includes Band B, but there is also an opportunity to deliver capital projects on a non-exclusive basis. Appendix 2 provides a more detailed summary of SPA. I'd like to take you to 4.9, which details the Strategic Partnering Board, the SPB. The SPB is the guardian vehicle for the commitments as set out in 4.8 of the report and will act as the primary mechanism for managing WEPCO's performance. The role of SPB is set out in 4.10. So it's necessary that Council appoints a representative to sit on the board. The attributes of the post order are set out in 4.11 and 12, and 4.13 details the operational arrangements for the board. More detailed summary of the board is provided at Appendix 3. It is proposed that Councillor Charles Smith, Cabinet Member for Education and Regeneration, will be the authority's representative on the board. Paragraphs 4.15 to 4.19 detail the process for taking forward projects to WEPCO and how they will be dealt with. And what happens if approval is not in place by September 2020? Well, Welsh Government are strongly encouraging authorities and further education institutes to sign up to arrangements with WEPCO via the SPA, regardless of whether the minimum schemes are not in place. While the SPA document is not yet in its final form, it is not envisaged that the draft SPA will change substantially once a preferred bidder is approved. It is recommended that the delegated authority is given to the Council's Corporate Director, Education and Family Support, after consultation with the Monitoring Officer to agree the final terms of the SPA and to make any necessary minor amendments to it as required. There is a mechanism within the SPA that will allow for those participants named in the ODU to sign up after 2020 by way of a deed of adherence, but this will create several complexities as detailed in bullet points under paragraphs 4.23. If a participant were to choose not to sign the SPA or deed of adherence and then wanted in the future to access partnering services or project services from WEPCO, it will not be able to do so in a procurement safe manner. The risks are detailed at 4.25. Welsh Government's procurement process for the delivery partner is provided under paragraphs 4.26 to 4.29. And this report was drafted during the standstill period, the Alcatel period, and Welsh Government had reported that all bidders had been advised of the outcome of the evaluation. Welsh Government has since concluded the procurement process. In terms of legal implications, approval to enter into the Strategic Partnering Agreement, the SPA, is an executive function requiring a Cabinet decision. Paragraphs 431 to 439 detail the legal aspects. I'd now like to take you to section 8 of the report, the financial implications. While there are no financial consequences in terms of agreeing to enter into the SPA, it is important to note that MIM schools, if progressed to completion, will result in revenue budget pressures and will be considered as part of the medium-term financial strategy. I now move to section 9, the recommendations. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Thanks very much for the comprehensive report, Gaynor. Another mammoth piece of work on Bambi. The Cabinet Member for Education and Regeneration would like to come in and declare an interest.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Gaynor. Yes, I mentioned in the report, so I need to declare an interest. It is a very legalistic report, so Councillor Patel, being a legal person, has agreed to step in and propose the recommendations, Leader. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Smith. Councillor Patel, please.
Agreed is a very very loose term there. I am happy to support this. I think it's a Welsh Government adopted scheme, so I think in terms of that we do have security around the process and the system, and it is an investment in Welsh media education, which is something that we support in Bridgend. I've had well, it's a very detailed report and I have read it, and I think I don't have any questions on it. I think I'm happy to move the recommendations as set out in paragraph 9.1.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor Patel. And at this stage, Gaynor, you can confirm that we're not agreeing to any specific Pathfinder projects. That is something that obviously would be subject to a further cabinet report if that were to happen at all, and we would have the full details on that proposal if it was officers' advice to progress such a proposal.
Yeah, proposals would come forward following feasibility studies. We're on site doing feasibility studies at the moment in that area, and I anticipate that a proposal may be late autumn or next spring sometime.
Okay, so once that feasibility work is completed, then we can consider the process as to how we fund those schools. Mm-hmm. And the very first and most important stage is that feasibility work, and there are benefits, aren't there, to being part of this arrangement in terms of the scale, economies of scale, and savings through a common framework and a common process that we will benefit from in Bridgend, as well as schools across Wales. And of course, it is a requirement, if it's a benefit from funding, that we're part of this programme, and we want to fully benefit from the funding that's available to make sure that we realise our ambitions in Band B for so many of our communities right across Bridgend County Borough. So I'm also very supportive of the recommendations. Any members want to come in, or are you all happy to support the recommendations also?
Happy to support, Leader.
Okay, thank you, Councillor White. Is everyone else?
Happy to support.
I'm happy to support, Leader.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. Thank you very much, Gaynor, and we really look forward to you coming back with the outcomes of the feasibility studies, and fingers crossed that there aren't too many great crested newts, dormice, or other rare species, or former mine workings, or any other potential issues that we can face when we want to build new schools. And a big thank you to your team. You are responsible for our flagship programme in the capital programme, and we all want to make sure that we can deliver these very exciting plans for our learners across Bridgend. Thank you, Gaynor.
Thank you, Leader.
Next on the agenda are urgent items. Now, I have not received any business that by special circumstances are considered urgent and that we need to consider at this meeting. So we will move on to a proposal to exclude the public for just one report on this agenda, and I will ask our Chief Officer for Legal, HR and Regulatory Services, our Monitoring Officer, to take us through this process. Kelly, please.
Thank you, Leader. As members are aware, but I'll explain just for the public, there is a requirement that Council transact their business in an open and transparent manner so that they're accountable to the public. However, there are some exemptions in the Local Government Act 1972, which does allow Cabinet to conduct some business in private if certain criteria are met. The criteria range, they can be confidential information, information relating to business and commercial needs. It's for the members themselves to consider the public interest and whether the public interest in having that information is outweighed by the interest of the business that's being discussed. In these circumstances, the report contains commercially sensitive information, and I'd ask Cabinet to consider the public interest test.
Okay, thank you for that, Kelly. Councillor White, in terms of that test?
Yes, proceed. Yeah, exclusion.
Okay. Clearly, the information in there is commercially sensitive. It is standard practice when we are discussing commercially sensitive information to consider that report in private, and it is always the case that ultimately the business and reports that we discuss do become public, but that will be in the future when it is proper to do so. Is everyone in agreement with that proposal?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Leader.
Thank you, everyone. So at this point then, as we are moving into a confidential part of the meeting, I'm going to conclude the public part of this meeting. Thank you all for your attendance. And can I ask any member of the public that is present virtually at this meeting if they could now leave the meeting so that we can begin the second part of